Do we think these are gonna pass the test with my brother? Last week I went over to my parents' house and I brought some white chocolate macadamia nut cookies, which were delicious. But my brother made the comment, "Why did you use white chocolate?" He doesn't like white chocolate. So this week we're going to humor him and make him some dark chocolate chip cookies. But since I don't really like to cater to my brother and give him exactly what he wants, I'm gonna do what I want with the chocolate chip cookie, which is make them with spelt flour. All my chocolate chip cookies pretty much follow the same base recipe, but when I bake them with an alternative flour, sometimes I have to use less flour and sometimes I have to use more. So in the case of spelt flour, I put slightly more flour than in my base recipe for regular all-purpose flour chocolate chip cookies. And the result is a nice thick and chewy cookie that tastes amazing. So in the bowl of our stand mixer, we're combining butter, granulated sugar, and dark brown sugar. I like to use dark brown sugar sometimes for chocolate chip cookies because it has a lot more flavor. We're gonna cream that together before adding the eggs and the vanilla, and then we'll finish with the flour, baking soda, salt, and the chocolate chips. Spelt flour is a whole grain flour. It does contain gluten, so these are not gluten-free cookies. I just like the flavor of it. And I find it gives a really interesting texture. I'm adding a full teaspoon of salt because I find chocolate chip cookies can be too sweet without the salt, and it brings out the flavor more. I like to whisk my dry ingredients together before adding them to the cookie dough, just to make sure that the baking soda, for example, is evenly mixed through the dough. Plus the salt. Nobody wants a clump of salt in their cookie. I like to use a Danish dough whisk for this. I find the Danish dough whisk does a better job of whisking dry ingredients together. I'm gonna add some walnuts to the spelt flour chocolate chip cookies because I like nuts in my cookies, but I'm gonna toast them first. Gotta scrape down the bowl. It's like the worst task when making cookies, but it's important. If you ever end up with patches that look uneven on your cookies, or if you find that some of your cookies spread more than others, usually it's because the sugar and the butter were not evenly incorporated into the dough, and it means you haven't scraped down your bowl enough. I like to scrape down the bowl and the beater at basically every step of the mixing process. It's annoying, but it's important. You know you've done toasting your walnuts when you can start to smell them. It smells like toasted nuts. I'm gonna give these a couple more minutes. I always crack my eggs into a separate bowl, just to avoid shells. We're gonna add 2 teaspoons of vanilla to the cookie dough for flavor. I'm using Costco vanilla because it's very affordable. Let's check on the walnuts. Yeah, this is better. I can smell toasty nut smell. Okay, so these are my toasted walnuts. I'm just gonna break them up with my fingers just to make them just slightly smaller pieces. You don't want the pieces to be too small, but you know, kind of like this versus this. I find it's better to break up the walnuts with your fingers because using a knife, sometimes it can be very uneven and you end up with a lot of nut crumbs, and I'd rather have chunks than crumbs. We want distinct pieces of nut in the cookies. Your mixer is also going to break apart these bigger pieces of nuts into smaller pieces, so that's why you don't want to make the pieces too small. down the bowl again. So I'm gonna mix the flour in first with the baking soda and the salt, obviously. And then I'm gonna add the chocolate chips and the walnuts at the end. Sometimes when I add the chocolate chips, I like to stir them in by hand, or at least finish the stirring by hand, just to make sure that those add-ins are evenly incorporated in the cookie dough. If they're not evenly incorporated, then again, sometimes some cookies will spread and some cookies will be thicker, and that's really because some cookies just have more inclusions, and so they just can't spread as much. I'm stopping the mixer at this stage because I need to scrape down the sides of the bowl, because as you can see, the flour has accumulated in a rim around the top of the cookie dough, and we need to get that into the dough. I'm also going to add in the chocolate chips and the walnuts because I don't want to over stir or over mix the cookie dough. You just need to mix for about 10 seconds. The cookie dough comes together and the chocolate chips and the walnuts are perfectly incorporated. I'm gonna get the beater out of the way, and then I'm going to do a final stir by hand with the spatula before scooping the dough. I'm gonna portion out all the dough into even scoops, and then from there I'm going to transfer them to baking sheets, probably 6 to 8 at a time. I like to scoop my chocolate chip cookies with a 1 1/3 ounce scoop. It's the one with the red handle. That works out to 39 mLs apparently. You'll get scoops roughly 40 to 50 grams probably with this cookie scoop. This is a no-chill cookie dough recipe, meaning that we can stir all the ingredients together and then bake it right away. If you chill it, the cookies will spread less and the texture might be slightly different. You can also freeze the portioned out cookie dough and bake from frozen. Might take a couple more minutes to bake the scoops of cookie dough if they're frozen. I like to roll each scoop of cookie dough in the palms of my hands just to even it out. So I'm going to bake 8 at a time on parchment lined cookie sheets. Sometimes I do 6, but it'd be nice if I could do 8. And then I kept back a few chocolate chunks and walnuts, so I'm just going to decorate the tops with the little extras. Now you can make these cookies with milk chocolate, white chocolate, or dark chocolate. Obviously I'm not using white chocolate today because my brother will protest again. Gotta love brothers. Let's check on the cookies. Looking pretty good. Gonna give them a couple more minutes. And I'm gonna rotate the pan at the same time. Nice. Edges are starting to brown. The surface looks set. I think we're good. For a rounder cookie, just helps pull the edges in. You have to do this when they're still warm. Now I've baked up all these Spelt chocolate chip cookies, so it's time for a taste test, which is my favorite time of the day. Crunchy on the outside, a little bit soft in the middle. So good. If you'd like the recipe for these Spelt chocolate chip cookies, head over to bakeschool.com and you'll find it there. Thanks for watching. Let's see if my brother likes them though. I can't imagine he's gonna complain when I show up with chocolate chip cookies with walnuts. But you never know. Brothers are tricky that way.